You can have April in Paris. I'll take winter in New York. And someday I'll take April in Paris. Beautiful girl, April.
It's the Marx Brothers Council Podcast, Episode 80, Strange Interludes. Just consider me, Matthew Coniam. Bob Gassell will be your producer this evening, and please welcome to the stage the world's first tap dancing unicyclist, Noah Diamond.
Whoa! Whoa!
Oh, if only you could see that, folks. Hey, Groucho Marx was many things, not least a brilliant comedian and central member of the comedy act The Marx Brothers. But what it seems he wanted to be above all else was a writer. His writing appeared in several magazines, and he published several books in his lifetime: humorous writing, letters, memoirs, you name it. He also occasionally tried his hand at plays and screenplays. Most of these went unproduced, but two exceptions were the screenplay The King and the Chorus Girl, filmed by Warner Brothers in 1937, and the stage play Time for Elizabeth, which was mounted in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and filmed for television in 1964. We're going to be looking at this pair of curate's eggs on the podcast today. As for our guest, well, therein lies a tale. Here at the podcast, we've long acknowledged a peculiar occult phenomenon. No sooner do we decide on a topic for the next show, someone will, like clockwork, pop up in the Facebook group and start talking about it. This time, the fates were especially helpful because, unbeknownst to us, Turner Classic Movies opted to give King and the Chorus Girl one of its comparatively rare TV airings a few days ago, and it was fresh in the minds of many. But the person who not only posted about it, but also casually compared it to Time for Elizabeth, just had to be our guest this month. It's friend of the podcast, friend of Marxfest, star of the Alsatia's revival, Kathy Biehl.
Insert caffeine and witty quip.
Tell us all how you're doing, Kathy.
I'm delighted to be here, and I have to say I find it really hysterical that this is what landed me an invitation on the podcast. Of all the things that could possibly be in the field of Marxania, this is it. Okay.
Well, we should say that you're no stranger to our listeners, although I guess, is this the first time you've been a guest?
Yes.
That's amazing, actually.
As opposed to a guest.
Well, Kathy has guested as a voice talent on previous episodes.
Yes.
And has contributed commentary to both all three, I think, of our commentary episodes, as well as our big Rashomon episode during the quarantine. So Kathy's voice has been heard many times on this podcast, but wow, that's an interesting fact. This is the first time you've actually been what we refer to around here as a guest.
Well, I don't believe in coincidences, and it's also really common in my life for me to smart off about something, and then a door opens.
Thank you for smarting off with us today.
Well, there's another thing besides Groucho that The King and the Chorus Girl and Time for Elizabeth have in common. They were both collaborations between Groucho and Norman Krasna. Krasna's is a name that should start ringing Marxian bells in most of your heads, but just in case anyone's not fully up to speed, Noah, can you tell us about Kras and his Marxian significance?
Yes, indeed. Norman Krasna is one of those names you run into when you start reading about the Marx Brothers, particularly about Groucho. Krasna was one of Groucho's best friends, and like most of Groucho's best friends, he was a writer. And like many of Groucho's best writer friends, he was an occasional collaborator of Groucho's. Not quite to the degree that Arthur Sheikman was, but he wrote with Groucho, and if you've read the Groucho letters, you know that he wrote back and forth to and from Groucho. Krasna was born in New York in the Corona neighborhood of Queens in 1909, so he's almost 20 years younger than Groucho. Like Nat Perrin, he studied law, and he was on his way to a perfectly respectable legal career before he was seduced by show business. Krasna has a lot of impressive credits. He's not one of those writers who only is noteworthy for having crossed paths with Groucho Marx a few times. Krasna won the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay in 1943 for Princess O'Rourke, which he also directed, and which has some things in common with The King and the Chorus Girl. It's a story about conquered royalty, trying to make a go of it as a regular person, falling in love. Princess O'Rourke. He was also nominated for Oscars for writing The Richest Girl in the World, 1934, Fury, directed by Fritz Lang, 1936, and The Devil and Miss Jones in 1941. Also notably wrote So This Is Africa for Wheeler and Woolsey in the year of Duck Soup, Hitchcock's Mr. and Mrs. Smith with Carol Lombard. He wrote The Flame of New Orleans for René Clair in 1940. And in 1954, teamed up with the other noteworthy Norman Panama, and Mel Frank to write White Christmas, starring Danny Kaye and Bing Crosby. And then he has this long career as a Broadway playwright and director, too. A lot of shows that, like Time for Elizabeth, came and went within a week or two on Broadway, but also some actual hits, including the play Dear Ruth, which was loosely based on Groucho's home life. Groucho and Krasna both had first wives named Ruth, so you may not want to read too much into the name of the character in Dear Ruth, or you may want to read a great deal into it. Also on Broadway, John Loves Mary, directed by Joshua Logan. Sunday in New York, starring Robert Redford, one of his early hits, directed by Garson Kanin. In 1945, Krasna edited the short documentary Lest We Forget, which was one of the first places where footage of the atrocities in the Holocaust were widely seen. It's another way that Krasna gets his name in the history books. And after his marriage to Ruth Frazee, which ended in 1950, he married Earl Galbraith Jolson, widow of Al Jolson, to whom he remained married until his death in 1984. He spent a good part of his final years in Switzerland, and you may recall that the last letter Groucho Marx ever wrote, or really dictated, was written to his good friend Norman Krasna in Switzerland. Steve Stoliar writes about that rather movingly in Raised Eyebrows, and Groucho's somewhat enigmatic use of the sentence, "I miss not seeing you." And it's never really clear if Groucho missed not seeing him or missed seeing him. Anyway, friends for decades, collaborators on the two masterpieces we're about to talk about today, Groucho and Krasna.
And Krasna, in I think it's in Hector Arce's book, describes what their collaboration consisted in. He said that it involved him, Krasna, sitting at the typewriter, staring at a blank wall, and twisting paper clips into Jimmy Durante's profile, while Groucho paced up and down the room and talked, usually about other things. A couple other Marx adjacent names just to take note of before we plunge in. Kenny Baker will appear. Be forewarned. And it's also, of course, directed by Mervyn LeRoy, who's the man who kind of saved them at the end of the failed RKO experiment and took them back to MGM. Although apparently, again, according to Krasna, Groucho strongly disapproved of some of LeRoy's own script contributions to The King and the Chorus Girl, and was quite rude to him in consequence. Arthur Sheikman does not appear in the credits, but he also gave the screenplay a professional dusting over. So let's just start in very general terms then. The King and the Chorus Girl, what the heck is it?
Well, I have an interesting perspective on this. I have studied a lot on my own about early days of cinema, and my perception is that in the early days of Hollywood, the first few decades, there was a peculiar fascination with the idea of nobility, and various people heading off to Europe and coming back with a noble title somehow because of marriage. Gloria Swanson did this. She might have been the first. She married a marquise. Douglas Fairbanks' second wife was nobility by marriage. So, and this also happens in the time frame of the King of England abdicating for a divorced American woman. So that's kind of the ecosystem, to my thinking, that this comes out of.
I think it's also quite Lubitsch-y, isn't it? And Chevalier-ish. It's got that kind of sub-Ruritanian kind of feel to it.
I did think a lot about Chevalier and Jeanette MacDonald film. So that's interesting that you'd make that connection.
It hasn't got the Lubitsch touch, I suppose we could say. But I mean, even Edward Everett Horton is quite subdued in it, isn't it? A lot of the dialogue is okay, but it's not really played like comedy, I think.
As a movie, it distinctly lacks energy. I think that might be the worst thing about it. Like if it were just a little more, if it had a little more of the fizzy quality, the effervescence that we expect from this kind of light comedy, it still wouldn't be great. I mean, it is essentially mediocre, but it could be fun though. You know, it could be a lot more fun than it is.
Yeah, I think none of it's bad, but something's just a bit off about it. The pacing is wrong, or the pitch is wrong. Scenes are too slow, and they go on too long.
What do we know about this Mr. Grevet in the lead role? He's somebody I've never heard of in any other context, but looking him up, I was surprised to see, he had a considerable career.
Yeah, he was a star in France.
He's a strange leading man, and I think he's part of the problem.
Yeah, again, I think he's not. He's strange, isn't he? I mean, part of the fact is that he is literally strange to us, and I think if the film had cast somebody who was already familiar, they then would have had kind of a head start on the material that he doesn't have. But he was a star in France, although he was actually Belgian. He'd made one English language film before, but in Britain, which was Noel Coward's Bittersweet, with Anna Neagle in 1933. This was his Hollywood debut, and he was played up as a big new sensation in the publicity, which is always a risky tactic, I think, and very dangerous if you've got a piece as sort of fragile as this one is. He wasn't a flop, which is what I had thought and sort of implied in my Groucho book. He did make a few more American movies after this, including playing Strauss in the 1938 version of The Great Waltz. His Hollywood career only actually ended when he opted to return to France in 1939, officially to continue his film career under Nazi patronage, but in reality as a member of the Armée Secrète and the Foreign Legion, and he was hailed as a war hero at the end of the conflict. He kept working until his death in 1970, and one of his last appearances in Hollywood is in the Audrey Hepburn caper comedy How to Steal a Million. So he generally did a lot more than I thought he did. I thought he was a one non-hit wonder, but he hasn't got a lot of personality, has he?
He's just very unusual, and I mean he's not totally without charm. Maybe used properly, he could have been effective. But I don't know. I just feel like to carry a film like this, which he sort of has to, it's hard to put your finger on him. What is he doing? What is this character he's playing? He has a kind of ambiguously European quality, but he's talked about as being this man of overwhelming, like undeniable power and charm, and he doesn't seem like that. He seems somewhere between a sort of parody of a royal dilettante and just an actor trying to get by. Also, his affect and vocal mannerisms remind me occasionally of Stan Laurel in ways that don't work for the character at all.
It's interesting, he doesn't even come across as particularly foreign. I mean, he was apparently he spent a lot of his childhood in England, and he has a pretty flawless British accent, so he doesn't even have his Frenchness to go for him.
He's a peculiar mix of looking strangely boyish, like almost alarmingly boyish, and bellowing at people.
Yes, like when he asks for ham and eggs. My goodness.
Well, the writing of this character also, I find extremely misguided because everyone talks about what appeal he has, and he starts out as a blackout drunk. Oh yes, that's incredibly appealing. And when he comes to and is coherent, he has moments of actually sparking and interacting with his leading lady, but then they have him climb her apartment building and bang on her window at 4 a.m. That's slightly menacing. That is not romantic. And then his reaction to her rejecting him is his impulse is immediately, well, then I'll just abduct her. Like this is kind of horrifying that this is what is presented as a fairy tale romance. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a little hard to tell sometimes if is it just dated in the way that the sexual politics and, romantic comedies of the 30s always feel dated now, or does it have its own special creepy set of problems?
I think, I don't want to make any great claims for its narrative sophistication, but I wonder if part of it isn't that it's trading in or trying to trade in his both in terms of where he comes from and from his social status, his unfamiliarity with contemporary American norms. Would that be fair? Or am I stretching backwards?
Yeah, I feel like that's an angle that could have been the thing. But it doesn't play like he's the fish out of water in this comedy.
No, that's true. Yeah.
That would have been a good way to try to make this work.
Before we talk any more, I think specifically about the film itself, let's just tick off a few other members of the cast. Mm-hmm. The kind of comedy support comes from Edward Everett Horton, who I've already mentioned, who is of course a genius master at comedy support. Here, kind of acting as if he's behind glass or underwater. He's just lacking his usual effervescence. He's partnered with Mary Nash, who is very good in the film, I think. She's probably best known these days for playing Margaret Lord in the other MGM film that's got Lydia the Tattooed Lady in it, the Philadelphia Story. But she's obviously, when you watch her, you think, oh, Margaret Dumont could have done this.
Yeah. She's good. I mean, yes, and Horton too is always. It's always nice to see him. But I agree. Nobody is operating at the height of their powers here.
And yet, I think Horton is the reason to watch it. He is the reason. He and occasionally Joan Blondell's expressions. And apart from that, I'll just be quiet.
Well, Blondell for me is the film's greatest asset. She's well known, of course, for her many appearances in Busby Berkeley musicals and as one of the best supporting actresses in the business, forcing the leads to keep up in a daunting plethora of pre-code classics. Millie, Illicit, The Public Enemy, Night Nurse, The Greeks Had a Word for Them, Three on a Match, and many more. She also kept working right up to her death in 1979. Crossed paths with Groucho again in 1957's Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter, and stole all her scenes in The Cincinnati Kid, Grease, and John Cassavetes' Opening Night. This was apparently her personal favorite of all her movies.
Yeah, that's hard to fathom, isn't it?
I mean, it is a comparatively rare lead. She's usually the friend of the heroine, but even so, it's an interesting thing for her to say.
She's wonderful, of course. I mean, and you'll never find anybody willing to take the counterpoint in a "is Joan Blondell adorable" debate. She's wonderful. She's funny. I hadn't thought about this before, but watching The King and the Chorus Girl a few times in the last week, I was surprised how she seems to me to anticipate Terry Garr in many ways.
Oh, that's a good comment.
I hadn't thought of it before, yeah.
Also, her character is written in a believable way, and there are consistencies in the approach. I mean, it makes sense. There's this American girl who's working in Paris as a chorus girl, and she's no fool, and no one's going to pull anything over on her. And she's also not going to get herself into any kind of troubling or dangerous situations. She's consistent from the beginning. She is well written. As for the rest of it, I came away with, I think Groucho really was a sentimental old fluff.
Do we think Groucho deserves any of the credit for writing this fairly strong female character? Do we get to give him any points for that? Or is that Krasna?
I think we have to give him points, I think, really, for being the dominant influence on the writing, but in a backhanded way, because Krasna is normally so much better than this. And I don't mean, that any of it is sort of terrible, but it just doesn't look like. I mean, it looks like somebody like Groucho, somebody with who's come from another discipline, sat down and said, "I'm going to write a film." It has that kind of a feel to it. It takes in bedroom farce, drawing room comedy, Cinderella romance, musical interludes, but none of it kind of percolates in the way that you would expect a Krasna script to do. It doesn't even build to any kind of climax either. It just sort of fizzles out. So in that respect, I am inclined, I think, to give Groucho the lion's share of the credit here.
I have a confession, and I don't know if this says more about me than about Groucho, but I watched this all the way through with no memory that Groucho had anything to do with this. Nothing in this film, watching it, brought that fact to mind. Now, and is something wrong with me for having forgotten this, or... So I watched it a second time, and then I took notes, and I have a list of lines that I think are Groucho lines. They're not many, but I do have some.
We'll certainly come to those then. But yeah, so it's not something that you would have been able to forget had you seen it on original release, because the posters had a little photo of him complete with grease paint saying he wrote it.
Yeah, and this is in the Marx Brothers years. I mean, this movie came out the same year as Day at the Races. It doesn't belong to the later period where Groucho's casting about trying to figure out what to do with his life.
Well, interestingly, they actually started work on it in 1934, which was that year between film contracts, when he also did 20th Century on stage. They started it then under the title Grand Passion. And then just kind of picked at it for a couple of years. So it did come when he was at a comparatively loose end. Okay, so yeah, let's have a look and see what we think we can safely attribute to Groucho. One thing that we definitely can, because Krasna told us we could, is the section early on when they go to see the show, and a pair of vaudeville comedians who are a genuine vaudeville double act, Al Shaw and Sam Lee, come on and do some fairly poor gags.
Listen, why are you losing your hair? Worry. Worrying? What are you worrying about?
Losing my hair.
Listen, you know how to avoid falling hair, don't you?
Sure. Step aside.
Say, old man, I'm losing my hair too. How can I save it?
In a cigar box.
Krasna told Charlotte Chandler, I said to Groucho, we need some used jokes. Can you tell me some jokes? Groucho said, about what? Tell me the subject. I didn't have anything in mind, but we'd just been talking about how I'd been losing my hair, and Groucho had recommended I have some scalp massages, so I said, the subject is hair. And he started. He said 6 or 7 jokes in a row about hair, like, my hair's getting thin, who needs fat hair? How do you avoid falling hair? You step aside. And he went on and reeled off just about any joke anyone had ever thought of about hair. So this little sequence is definitely Groucho strolling down vaudeville memory lane, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And if you imagine, in an alternate timeline, Groucho writing a great screenplay, you would think it would be full of this kind of thing. His inside knowledge of show business could have, and probably should have, become, some kind of work of drama. Shaw and Lee were this vaudeville team that outlived vaudeville. They were still like getting up and doing their 2-man act before movies, into the 50s. I mean, they just never stopped doing it. But in a Groucho context, of course, it's hard not to think of them as stand-ins for Gallagher and Sheen.
So, Kathy, what did you come up with as surefire Groucho contributions?
When the king and the chorus girl walk into a more plebeian restaurant than where he usually eats, there are police sitting in a car watching, and they're commenting on that restaurant.
Look where he's going. Why, I wouldn't even eat in there.
He'll get poisoned.
Yes, and they serve it in such small portions.
Did Woody Allen see this movie?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because that is used by Allen in a context when he's talking about Groucho anyway.
Yes, I mean, I think this must be a joke that just exists in various forms all over the place. But how interesting to find it in a Groucho screenplay, and pretty much word for word, and such small portions. That is the Woody Allen phrasing.
It's the end of Annie Hall,
Yeah,
right?
Or the beginning.
Or
of
about
it. Yeah.
the beginning of Annie Hall. Yeah, Eggs is the end of Annie Hall.
Yes.
Then in the restaurant, when the pastry tray is proffered, Dorothy chooses her dessert by saying,
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. I'll take mo.
I nominate that as a Groucho line.
Mm-hmm.
During the bike ride, notice that I have now skipped through most of the film. During the bike ride in the park.
Alfred, there's something I've got to tell you.
Come back in an hour. I'm still out to lunch.
It's kind of a non sequitur, so that I nominate as Groucho-esque. Edward Everett Horton gets the line.
Oh, well, it's nothing, Anna, and you know it. Why, when I was Chancellor, I frequently had ideas.
Yes, I noticed that one this time, for the first time, yeah.
And then,
How did you find Belgium? I didn't look for it.
Yes.
Can you swim?
I don't know, Your Majesty. I've never tried.
you'll notice how long this list is.
Yeah, it's like if you watch it knowing that Groucho was involved and you're looking for the contributions that might be his, there are, some funny or witty or clever lines in it that you'd say, oh yeah, that probably was Groucho's line. But if you didn't know that Groucho was involved, I don't think there's anything about this movie that would make you say, did Groucho Marx write this?
I think the closest thing in it that come to Groucho-esque humor rather than just, good jokes is the absurd list of titles that Edward Everett Horton reads out.
I'm just a plain, simple count. An ordinary knight of the bath, an average knight of the garter, an everyday keeper of the scrolls, a run-of-the-mind custodian of the guard.
To sum it up, this is Count Humbert. How do you do, Count Humbert?
A routine captain of the lancers, and a matter-of-fact marshal of the mounted. How do you do?
Yeah, and it is also interesting how the very beginning of the movie, which is a panning across a hallway that has all these portraits of all the Alfreds who have preceded him. He's Alfred the Seventh, right? So you see the first and the second, this whole lineage of royalty that he is descended from. And there's two guys together there's one guy, one very obese Alfred, who is numbers 4 and 5. And that's like...
I missed that completely.
Yeah, it's like it's the first joke in the movie, and it's like a very broad... the kind of, it's not like anything in the Paramount Marx Brothers films, but it's that kind of comedy, And I'm not sure there's anything in the rest of the film that sort of violates reality to that extent.
Oh, an ocean liner going across Niagara Falls.
Oh, that final shot, yes, yeah.
Or by Niagara Falls. That kind of defies reality as well. And
good point.
Somebody on spur of the moment buying out an entire ocean passage. What happened to all of the rest of the passengers who had booked? You don't know what I had to go through in order to charter this boat. No, and I can't possibly imagine it.
Yeah, that's one of those movie things. Like, take the boat to Niagara Falls. We're getting married. But now, how many weeks are you going to spend, like, going from France to Canada? It just makes no sense.
Well, I actually had written down here as a question, would it be fair to say we'd like this more, or at least appreciate it more for what it is, a pleasant little romantic trifle, if it hadn't been written by Groucho and didn't have that great weight of expectation? But Kathy, you've kind of answered that already, because you watched it not knowing it was written by him and still voted down. But what do you think now?
Well, one thing before Noah answers, I did rewatch it and I had a more charitable reaction to it the second time. I think it's a solid C plus mid-30s romantic comedy. Maybe a B, maybe.
Yeah, I guess that's about where I am too. It's not that bad. I mean, you can't hate it. It's not offensively bad, nor is it impressively good. Just Groucho's name on it gives us a sense that it should be great, And this is the only screenplay that Groucho is credited with, only produced screenplay. So we want it to be something significant, and it's not that. It's not significant.
Unfortunately, at least one of his unproduced screenplays, the Madcap Mary Mooney one, seems like it's 100 times better than this, doesn't it? Or at least 100 times more what you would expect from him. And it's just a shame, really, that this is the one that got all the way to the screen.
It is interesting, and in contrast to the next piece that we're going to discuss today, that Groucho had a hand in writing something that has no Groucho role in it. I mean, there's really no part he could have played unless it was like a cameo as a waiter or something like that. And that's something, this obviously wasn't ever intended to be a performing vehicle for him, but you still might think that the most natural thing for him to do his first time out as a screenwriter would be to write the kind of character that he was accustomed to playing and thinking about. And he did not do that.
Just two things I think worth singling out before we possibly move on. Full credit to the film. I think there's an absolutely splendid moment during one of the musical numbers where Joan Blundell and two other singers, in perfect unison, open cigarette cases, take out a cigarette, light it, and smoke it while singing. If you slept through that bit, it is worth checking on. It's very, very impressive. And also, of course, we have Kenny Baker, and we must mention that Kenny Baker does come on and do a number. Not entirely the coincidence, it seems, because of course he was very much under the wing of Mervyn LeRoy and came as part of the LeRoy package to Out the Circus. But there is a lovely, while he's singing, there is a cutaway to Fernand Gravet looking incredibly bored and contemptuous, which I think Bob should cut into all the musical numbers in Out the Circus. Well, the other thing that I think that should be said in all fairness about the film is that it was a minor hit. It did pretty well at the American box office. It got good reviews. It got the kind of reviews, in fact, that Groucho would have dreamed of, saying things like, if he ever wants to quit performing, he'll always be welcome as a writer. That sort of thing. It got a lot of that. One piece says Krasna is now being referred to as Zeppo Krasna. Unfortunately, though, it ran into a bit of trouble because of its accidental adjacency to the abdication of King Edward VIII and his affair with Wallis Simpson. There's no real connection. As I said, it was written or started in 1934, and there's really only the slenderest of similarities. The fact that it's a kind of a across the tracks romance involving an aristocrat is about the only connection there is. Unfortunately, Warner Brothers, seeing the coincidence, thought it would be good publicity-wise, and so played it up. Not realizing that in Britain this was considered a constitutional crisis and not something that could be treated lightly at all. Picturegoer magazine published an open letter to Warner Brothers complaining about its outrage on good taste. And this had a knock-on effect, apparently, in America too, where the word went out that no light-hearted references to this crisis could be made in movies, or anything that could be taken to be a light-hearted reference to it. As a result of which, apparently, a line was taken out of A Day at the Races, where Groucho was to say of Harpo, "His brain has abdicated." That was considered apparently a little too close to the bone, so that went as well. So unfortunately, it did have this kind of reputation as being a problem picture. But in terms of reviews and in terms of box office in America, it did very well.
Do you think some of the befuddlement that we feel about why this film isn't more Groucho-like is explained by that? Like, maybe Groucho was deliberately trying to demonstrate that he could write a conventional comedy because he actually was thinking that maybe screenwriting was the direction he wanted his career to go in. It seems a little bit unlikely to me. But do we think that? I mean, I can imagine Groucho having ambitions to be a playwright, or an author of books. But it seems like so many of his peers were thanklessly churning out Hollywood material. It would surprise me to think that Groucho was ambitious as a screenwriter.
I think you have to wonder as well if there was any rivalry with Zeppo writing screenplays, including one apparently with S.J. Perelman. I mean, obviously we now know with hindsight that none of them took off, but he wouldn't have known that. It would have sounded fairly surefire, I would think, a comedy written with Perelman. So maybe there was just that slight element of I better do some of this too.
Who knows how this organically grew out of his friendship with Krasna either. I mean, it could be that they bounce things back and forth as part of their general banter. There's no telling. I mean, I don't know enough about their relationship, but that would make sense to me that this was something that they sort of did.
Yes, I don't know. With Time for Elizabeth, there's a little bit more on record about where the idea came from and how they kind of hit on it. But this, as far as I know, we don't know why, having decided to collaborate, this is what they came up with. This rather strange, fairly common or garden ordinary story about a kind of a Cinderella romance. It doesn't seem like the sort of thing that either of them would particularly want to do, and it doesn't seem like the sort of thing that either of them would have thought was particularly surefire.
Yeah, the sort of semi fairy tale like setting. There is some. I mean, there are other examples of that in Krasna's work. Princess O'Rourke, I mentioned earlier, is somewhat similar. It's set in contemporary New York, but it's about a conquered former European autocrat. I wonder if to Groucho maybe there was a Gilbert and Sullivan quality about some of this that appealed to him. That's a little bit of a stretch, but it is interesting in the comparison with Time for Elizabeth that Groucho, chose or he and Krasna chose with The King and the Chorus Girl to do this kind of. I don't know. It is a contemporary story, so it's not quite a fairy tale thing. It's not set in a faux medieval setting or anything like that, but it also doesn't really feel like the modern world. It's in that kind of Hollywood fairy tale place. It reminds me a little bit of Moss Hart's screenplay for Hans Christian Andersen. Like, you are capable of writing the most urbane, witty comedy dialogue that's ever been written. So why are you laboring to write stilted European storybook style stuff? You have strengths.
It is also, I'd forgotten until you said earlier about when you were talking about Krasna that he wrote not a terribly well-known film, but a film that I know quite well called The Richest Girl in the World, which is also similar now I come to think about it, in that it's about the richest girl in the world changing places with her secretary, and each one pretending to be the other, and so there's a kind of mistaken identity romance where a rich person is pretending not to be, and vice versa. So there's that kind of element to it. So maybe Krasna was just a sucker for those kind of sentimental romance stories.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Anybody got anything more they want to say about King and the Chorus Girl?
The only thing I would add is if I wanted to actually take the time to do it, which I don't, I think it would be fascinating to look at the initial tour of those portraits, because I recognized one as inspired by an Albrecht Dürer painting. I saw a couple of others that looked like they were actual remakes of portraits of various Habsburgs. So I don't think those were out of thin air. I think somebody was having fun with some visual quotes with all of those portraits. Except for the Fat Albert. I don't know where that came from.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I wonder if some of them were. The last one is clearly a portrait of Ferdinand Grave, but I wonder if, you know, here's for the opening gag of this movie, we're going to need 6 portraits. Get on that. Get the guy who did After the Hunt to make 6 Alberts for us.
Okay, so let's move on to Time for Elizabeth now, and I'm going to start by quoting myself, the first paragraph of the section on Time for Elizabeth in my Groucho book, where I write, "Few of Groucho's solo projects had as long and convoluted a history as that of Time for Elizabeth. It is by any measure a slight work, and yet when one considers the years over which it was a live project in Groucho's professional career, the time he spent writing it, and the time in which he spent performing it, a span of some 25 years, one could be forgiven for thinking it the most important, personal, significant work of his life. The story of Time for Elizabeth is not so much the one that unfolds on stage and screen as the story of its author and of his obsession with proving critics and audiences wrong and his own estimate of his writing's worth correct." So this is a play about the general manager of a washing machine company called Ed Davis, who is tiring of the rat race and decides to throw in his job and move to paradise somewhere with his wife. Things don't work out the way he dreams that they will, and he ends up going back on much better terms. But even so, as I say, its take-home message is that freedom and relaxation are all very well for a while, but what a man really wants is an office job. So again, it's a fairly kind of bland, anonymous concept, but it's something that they wrote together over a number of years and under a number of titles: Middle Ages, Garden of Eden, April Fool. They revised it constantly. Groucho tells Miriam, I think, that the second and third acts had been completely rewritten at least twice. It was performed in 1940. Was it 1948 or 1949 on Broadway? Everybody, I think, wanted Groucho to be in it, but he wasn't sure. Otto Kruger was cast, and although it didn't live up to Groucho's fear that it would close after one performance, it closed after 8 performances. It got very bad reviews, as you would expect, which drove Groucho to the closest I think he ever came to non-comic, genuine fury. Let younger fellows take the whippings, he said to Miriam, saying that he was gonna give up. He called the critics unfair, bigoted bastards. And as far as the critic who said that the show contained not one authentic laugh, he suggested that this critic was either stewed or neglected to turn on his hearing apparatus. So I think partly out of that sheer resentment and out of a desire to prove people wrong, he just refused to give up on the piece. He tried to sell it as a movie. It was picked up actually at the time by Warner's, but obviously once they saw how badly it did, they didn't persevere with that. But when Norman Krasna and Jerry Wald went to RKO in 1950 on very good terms, it was slipped in there as a prospective future production. What really turned it around, though, was when Groucho finally consented to appear in it, and not on Broadway, but in the much less demanding Straw Hat circuit in summer tours. And he did this over many, many years in the late 50s and the early 60s, playing to audiences that he described to Charlotte Chandler as mostly women with hats eating candy. And so you get the impression that as long as Groucho was on the stage, it really didn't matter how good the play was. Obviously it was going to do very, very well, and it did do very, very well for many, many years. And it was off the back of that it was drastically shortened and then filmed for television in 1964 as part of Bob Hope's Chrysler Theatre. So it's that shortened television version that we're most familiar with now. It's about 45 minutes once you take out the commercials, and the main casualty is the first act, which was entirely set in the office. The section that in the TV film is the kind of 5-minute prologue was the entirety of the first act. Groucho and Krasna didn't do the adaptation themselves. It was done by Alex Gottlieb, who we last met fighting Zeppo in our Zeppo episode, he was a neighbor of Groucho's, and Harry Tugend, who also produced the Incredible Jewel Robbery, produced it. I have a feeling I probably like it more than either of you two, which is not to say that I like it a hell of a lot.
I will tell you, the first time I saw it was with the late Frank Bland of the legendary Viaduct.com. And our joint reaction afterwards was, after all those years, this? Like, really? You would have thought all of that work would have led to something? And particularly the fact that Groucho performed this on stage so much after coming out of the tradition of testing jokes on audiences for years and years and years, you'd think there might actually be something funny in this film. And I challenge you to find any... Did you laugh at anything, Matthew? I didn't laugh.
A couple of it's made me smile. The clip which I'm hoping you will hear now made me smile.
I said, how far is the ocean?
You mean the distance?
Well, I don't mean the width.
As the crow flies, 1 short mile.
What time does the next crow leave?
There are lots of stories as well. What's he called? Robert, the You Bet Your Life chap.
Dwan?
Dwan, yes. In his memoir, he went on tour with him during it, and he says there's a lot of stories about Groucho doing outrageous ad libs that get kept because they're so funny, including an utterly bizarre one where there's a sequence where Groucho doesn't want to eat his dinner, which is organic carrots, I think. And he wrote a letter to Krasna saying the rabbit scene is the best thing in the play. The rabbit scene is really killing them. And Krasna said, there is no rabbit scene. What on earth is he talking about? Well, Dwan eventually fills us in there. Groucho, as a joke, pulls open a drawer under the dinner table and tips the carrots in, which is already, an absurd Groucho-y thing to do, not something that Ed Davis would do. But after a while, he thought, wouldn't it be funny if at the end I open this drawer with the carrots in and a live rabbit comes out? So a live rabbit was secured, and that was what got the show's biggest laugh, apparently. But yeah, no, nothing spontaneous in this at all, is there? It's all very, very regimented, and it also feels the one thing it certainly shouldn't, which is kind of unrehearsed. And you almost get the feeling that he's not familiar with what he's delivering.
It's because it's so artificial.
Yeah.
There is nothing natural about this. It's stereotype after stereotype after stereotype. Someone retires, he gets a watch. You meet your daughter and her boyfriend. He proposes marriage. You give your consent. Next time you see them, your daughter's pregnant. It's fine. Okay, you move here, you do this, you do that. And there wasn't anything that felt the slightest bit natural or organic, despite the fact that he's planting a garden.
And his his performance as well, which he's obviously done hundreds of times, he comes across as quite uncomfortable. I thought, which is surprising to me because he's a brilliant comic actor. And while I'm used to brilliant straight actors not being able to do comedy, it's slightly more surprising to me to see a brilliant comic actor having trouble with something as simple as line readings, because you would think that was absolutely their stock in trade, is how to read a line even if it isn't funny. But he sort of acts like he's reading it off cue cards, doesn't he?
Yeah, he gives a performance that feels like a big star phoning it in. But we know that that's not quite the situation. This is his own vehicle. It's important to him. He wants it to come off well. I know he was, supposedly very reliant on cue cards during the shooting, which is surprising because he was so familiar with the material. Maybe that accounts for some of the stilted quality of his performance, but it doesn't really excuse it. It sounds, from what we know about the stage performances he gave over a period of about 4 or 5 summers in this show, that he eventually used the production as an excuse to make the audience laugh the way he always knew how to do, which was basically to turn the evening into a travesty of itself. And inject stuff like pulling a rabbit out of the dresser, stuff that he knew would make the audience laugh, especially if they saw Groucho Marx doing it, but that basically threw out the whole idea of, like, we're writing a conventional, legitimate play here, which seems to have been the original intention. I do think, there is something deliberate about, the crafting of a very middle of the road vehicle, a very bland thing that couldn't possibly upset anybody. We want Groucho's few outings as a dramatist to be iconoclastic, anarchic comedy craziness. We feel like that's what he should give us, and that's what he knew how to do.
Or literate wordplay. I would settle for literate wordplay.
Yeah. But this is this 1950s Groucho who's much more interested in demonstrating that he is this American everyman, this very suburban character, even though New York City is his backdrop here. And it's funny. It seems like that is an impulse toward, mediocrity or middle of the road work. But actually, at this time, people were doing it very successfully. Like a play like The 7-Year Itch. It is very much in this same mode, a very conventional middle-aged man in a kind of, in a rut with his career and his home life, has his life shaken up a little bit. It can be done in a witty way, as a sophisticated original vehicle. But Groucho and Krasna didn't quite do it here.
There are two little glimpses of the Groucho we know that sneak through. In the bridge game, which is an appalling experience in light of the other bridge game, Groucho stands and he starts doing a lot of physical bits to try to get his wife to get these people out of his house. And those actually have a fair amount of movement for a man his age and echo the highly physical Groucho that we knew. And later he wiggles his eyebrows at the camera and you go, oh yes, I know him.
Yes, at the very end he gives up and just does a bit of Groucho for us, doesn't he? Yeah, but there's also one, literally I think just one moment of authentic vocal delivery as well, because he has quite a few jokes that he delivers in this incredibly bland way, particularly when he's giving up his job and he's free to be insulting to his boss. You would think that would trigger the old Groucho, but no, he still does it like he's just had a stroke or something, But in that scene, which I think is probably the best scene actually, that's got the bridge game in it, where he offers them a drink.
Anybody be interested in a little scotch?
Scotch what?
Scotch juice.
Suddenly he's Groucho again there, but we're talking literally 2 lines. It is. I mean, obviously, of course, he can't start pulling rabbits out of drawers. But when you think of just how honed this piece was, and when you think that it has been condensed here to probably less than half its original length, there's not much in it. It feels padded even at this length, doesn't it? And it also, of course, has a laugh track, which kills comedy. But
The laugh track accentuates how unfunny this is, to my thinking.
Especially at the very beginning, like before we ever see Groucho, we hear him in voiceover. And there's a couple of limp jokes in his opening voiceover that get these laugh track laughs. And because there's no way an audience could possibly be receiving that performance, it just hits you right in the face with how artificial it is right at the top.
yeah, it's like the Munsters. I always think, I would be enjoying this much more if you weren't trying to tell me that people are screaming with laughter at him banging his head on the door frame.
Right. Yeah, or sitcoms, where all of a sudden, oh, the audience is in the car with them too. That's amazing. How did they handle that?
Something else that is trying way too hard in this is how his relationship with his wife and his daughter is portrayed, because every time you see him with his daughter, with his wife, for example, he's always using terms of endearment. They're in the restaurant. They're sitting very, very close. He has his arm around her. He tries to carry her over the threshold. I'm sorry, that's not going to happen at this age. It just seems to be overly overemphasized to a point of it being absolutely unbelievable. When his daughter is overly exuberant at any contact with him. She answers the phone and it's like she's just been told she's won $100,000, that she's got a phone call from him. I don't know, that might have been the directing, that might have been the way it was written, but there's just an absolutely unrealistic quality to all of us. And then I would add to that, when his boss's wife walks in, and I'll have more to say about her in a second, and sees the house and, oh, what a cute little house, and immediately wants to buy it. Like, no, this is all too pat. It's too pat, and it is excessive to the situation, therefore completely unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, it feels very much, doesn't it, like what it is. It feels like a 45-minute, hastily written bit of television. It doesn't feel like a play that's 2 decades old or more.
Maybe we could give a few points for the relationship between the Ed Davis character and his wife. There is at least, this does show us Groucho in a relationship that is, basically age appropriate and genuinely loving. I mean, this could have been a very bitter portrait of a nasty marriage with two people insulting each other, and it's not. There's genuine affection between them. His wife, Ed Davis's wife, is kind of one step ahead of Ed and a little smarter and even a little funnier than he is in some ways. And we also get that it's not like Groucho comedy, but in this vehicle, the moment where he's carrying her off to the bedroom and immediately emerges having hurt his back is reasonably funny. He plays that pretty nicely, and that's not bad as comedy goes.
And she's called Kay.
Oh, that's right, and her name is Kay. Yeah. What is the actress's name? It's eluding me.
Kathy Eames, and she was also played the role on stage and got an extremely strange review from the Knickerbocker Times. Catherine Eames, a blonde of indeterminate age, somewhere in her 30s as a guess, plays Groucho's wife. She did well, but needs new suspenders on her petticoats. In Act 1, the garment made an unscheduled descent of about 9 inches. Just the kind of review of which one dreams of getting, I think. Speaking of wives, of course, we should also mention that Eden is in it in a part that is rather more substantial in the play than it is on television, but would almost certainly have been cut entirely on television were it not for the fact that Eden plays it and did play it on stage as a kind of a man-eating Florida gold digger whose dialogue I think comes uncomfortably close to how one might imagine her describing Groucho, doesn't it?
I met a darling man today.
You meet one every day.
I try. That's my business. Finding a husband. It's one of the biggest businesses there is.
What's so good about it down here?
I landed 3 of my 4 husbands right off the pier here. The hotel lobbies are full of the old goats. All retired. all with money, all in the frame of mind that life owes them someone like me. There never was a happier hunting ground, if you're looking for goats.
Yeah, that's true. It's a strange performance. She's fine. I mean, she delivers the lines credibly. It feels like we've dropped into something else, though, her scenes. It doesn't really feel like it's this same play. It's also accompanied by like very cliched kind of sexy music. I don't know if it's really a saxophone or a slide, but it sounds like that. It's just sort of played up in a corny way. But she's fine.
The plot point at the end with her also falls into the unbelievable category, though. What well-dressed woman asks her married girlfriend, "Oh, can I borrow your pocketbook? Because it goes so well with the outfit I'm going to wear tomorrow." Like, what? I've been a woman for a number of decades, and I've never asked to trade pocketbooks with somebody or seen another woman do that. So that was from the men's minds. There was not a woman who told them that.
I suppose now then is the time for me to come clean and explain why I am generally warmly disposed towards this, which is for the reasons that I was talking about at the start, which is just how much a chunk of his life was invested in this, which he obviously must have been thinking about when he was making this particular production, because he's playing a character who is kind of getting to the end of his life and taking stock and not being terribly happy with what he sees. And you have to remember that when Groucho wrote this part, he was very comfortably younger than Ed Davis. As he performs it through the years that follow, he kind of catches up with him. Now he's actually older, so Groucho is now playing a character who is younger than him, and I think there is just a wistful poignancy that I don't think I'm superimposing onto it because I know that. I do genuinely get the feeling that we are seeing a kind of a wistful sunset Groucho here. I love the line, incidentally.
That's what I want, a sunset and a swordfish.
That's a wonderfully Marxian line. But there's a bit of an interview that he gave to promote this production, where he says, "My friends are too old to play golf, and I don't play cards, so I sit at home. But I wouldn't care to live in one of those senior citizen spas. They are preludes to cemeteries. People are very much interested in dying while living, it seems. Soon there will be shopping centers for caskets. Do you know there are only 4 casket companies in the whole US? How's that for a market? The whole funeral business is barbaric. I think it's awful. How did we get on this ghastly subject?" So I think we are looking at here at a Groucho who is seeing in this play, the passage of his own life, which is something that he could only have imagined as he was actually writing it. And I just get a sense of that, and it makes me want to put a blanket around its shoulders and give it a hug.
Yeah, I mean, in the "we love Groucho" context, this is a little piece of the thing we love, and there are plenty of reasons to take it into our hearts on that basis. I was interested, Kathy, in one of the comments you made in the Facebook group about, it applies to both of these collaborations with Krasna, and maybe to some of Groucho's other writing too, that Groucho was, perhaps understandably, a little clueless about the world beyond show business.
What made me say that was when he's sitting in his store that's going bad, and it was a choice of a term, and this reveals my own background as having done a lot of small business law and corporate law for decades, but he says that he refers to his business as the agency, which it was not. A store is not an agency. And I know that he knew the concept agency because he had agents, but there was something in that set my psychic feelers off too, of he has this whole vision of what a business is, and it may or may not have much to do with what really happens in business.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously, he never had a job in his life, did he? He never had a non-theatrical job ever. So he literally has and even as a boy, he's from the youngest age he's on stage. So he's never sat behind a desk and answered a telephone, other than as a joke.
Well, and it's not that he's not worldly wise. He was the youngest brother to go off on his own. He had to fend for himself in Colorado. He knew things, but he was not a deal maker like his brother Chico, or Gummo or Zeppo. I mean, those guys understood how business and money worked, and I don't have the sense that Groucho did it all. I honestly think Groucho was a sentimental old fluff. I think I'm serious. I will cling to that, because there are these beats again in Time for Elizabeth that are, this is what should happen here and here and here and here, and it's not really how human life plays out, but it's somebody's construct of how things should go.
There's some kind of, in the middle and later years, there's a reluctance on Groucho's part, it seems, to play to his strengths. Almost anything to avoid playing to his strengths until the moment comes when he has to. And that's when he starts wiggling his eyebrows and saying, okay, if you want the Groucho show, I'll give you the Groucho show. And both of these scripts can be said to be a factor of that. I mean, to us, we would love to have a tiny fraction of what Groucho knew about show business. The show business experience in that man is like precious gold to us. And the idea that he devoted so much time and energy to like trying to get into the head of the vice president of a washing machine company just seems crazy. But to him, that felt like a meaningful connection with the audience that he thought he needed to make. So
when you revive this play off Broadway, which I believe you're going to be doing next year, or okay, if you're the script doctor at the time, what would you? How would you change this thing? I mean, would you just say go for broke and be Groucho, or is there a third way?
Well, I think I'd be interested in Kathy's answer to this dramaturgical question too. But to me, I think probably yes. If you want to make this into a great evening of entertainment, yeah, I think that's it. Turn it into the Groucho show. Because no matter how well done it is, we just don't need this comedy,
And there could be somebody in a corporation who's a character, who's the guy that's always saying weird things, even though he got to where he was. They could have given him more of an edge or more verbal acuity, and maybe even more callback jokes. The fact that what lures him, or part of the lure to where he goes in Florida, is fishing. I thought, well, that's not a coincidence. And he also says at one point, I'm not much of a joiner. Now, maybe I'm stretching it, but I think that's a private joke about not being a member of a club that would have him. I don't know. Maybe I'm stretching. Otherwise, there's no reason for this to exist.
Yeah. Yeah, isn't the Dr. Shufro, the reference to the name Shufro, is kind of a private joke about Salwin Shufro, Groucho's longtime financial advisor? I mean, there are times when Time for Elizabeth feels like it kind of wants to be a skeleton key to the Groucho universe, but it doesn't go far enough in that direction.
Just out in left field, I'd like to point out one thing that jumped out at me that fit with the character in The King and the Chorus Girl who climbed a window, banged on a woman's window at 4 a.m, and then decided that the way to woo her was to abduct her. Groucho says a line that's utterly cringy. He throws it off. He says to his daughter,
"Why don't you get into something uncomfortable?"
Yes.
Like that. I almost went slack-jawed at, really? That's heading into Chico territory, I mean, honestly, very disturbing.
That line stands out for that reason, for being cringy and weird, but also for feeling like in another universe, that would have been the setup for a Groucho joke, I feel like I'm in something uncomfortable right now. I don't know. There's just you could mold that into something funny.
Also, there's this character who we hear about, isn't it? But we don't get to see any of him living up to his reputation, which is the boss's brother-in-law, who is apparently rubbish at his job and causes constant chaos. That's kind of the play we want. Is happening over there in the next office along, isn't it?
Yeah, because Groucho, even when Groucho, like, he's not playing his old character here, obviously, but he still isn't. He's a perfectly good actor in the sense that he's believable and natural and he knows how to deliver a line, but he's not doing enough as an actor to make us care about this character. We don't ever have a sense of like, oh, I hope things work out okay for Ed Davis. He never seems to be in any real peril. So if we're not laughing hysterically, then what is holding our attention?
And there's another nice quote as well, which gives us a strong sense of what we're missing in this production, as opposed to what we might have got had we gone to see it on one of its late theatrical engagements. The actor Wyatt Cooper, who played Ed Davis's son-in-law on stage, described a typical performance. Groucho tells me about the loss of the money, and then he quotes his father about something, and I'm supposed to follow with, "I'll get a job." But instead, Groucho started to ad-lib, and as each ad-lib got a big laugh, he kept adding to it. I don't know why I keep quoting him. He didn't have a penny when he died. Audience laughs. As a matter of fact, I was stuck for the funeral. Audience laughs. I tried to write it off on my income tax, but they wouldn't let me. Audience laughs. I tried to write it off under amusements. Audience laughs. Then when Cooper threatened to giggle, Groucho would needle him further. And when I would break up, he would make some kind of personal remark about me, such as, my daughter married a sex fiend, which didn't help me much.
Yeah, okay. Now you're cooking.
So that's what we almost get. We see something happening in the next room to that.
Since you bring up an actor who played a part, I'd like to detail some of things that people could look for if they're curious enough to watch this. This is an additional amusement that's possible for you. The cast is peppered with people that had some very interesting connections to other things that played out in Hollywood. When you're watching The Bridge Game, the woman who owns up to not knowing how to play bridge, Madge Blake, Mrs. Willing, was Aunt Harriet on Batman after this was over, which was her last role. And then the son-in-law is played by John Considine, who is still alive, who's one of his grandfathers was the head of the Pantages circuit, and his younger brother was a Disney star who was in My Three Sons, Tim Considine. And he also wrote Robert Altman's A Wedding. So there's some really interesting things that grew out of this. And the actress who plays Schaefer's wife, you might recognize as Oliver Wendell Douglas's mother on Green Acres. She had quite the sitcom career playing very, very uppity women with strange cultured accents that don't really exist in normal life. That's just a few of them.
His boss is Roland Winters, a character actor who is best known to me as the third and least Chinese of all of the major screen Charlie Chans, following a Swede and I can't remember what Sidney Toler was. Not sure. No, maybe he was just American as well. But anyway, Roland Winters was the last one and the least Oriental of the lot. But I'm going to rewind to something you said, Kathy. The guy that played his son-in-law is still alive, you said.
Yes. Yes. He's like 91. Yes.
Ooh.
Yeah, so Austin Pendleton is not the only person.
Yes.
Yeah, Austin Pendleton is not the only person still alive who's worked with Groucho.
Right. In a scripted, there are some You Bet Your Life contestants who are still with us, but
Actually acting with, yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. And I mean that Considine vaudeville circuit, that rings a bell too.
Yeah, both sides of his lineage came out of running vaudeville circuits.
Wow.
And still he ended up in this piece of shit.
It was a paycheck.
No, I'm being cruel. I like it.
Well, you can look at a lot of what on variety TV and in these, I don't know what the phrase for it, the real term for it is, but like the magazine shows that were compilations of different scripts. You could look at them as taking important performers and encasing them in amber. Like we get to see, even if they're superannuated when it happened, we get a glimpse of people who dominated the entertainment industry in the middle of the 20th century. It might be a pathetic glimpse.
I was about to say that's a good note on which to end it, but that's an even better one. Right, well, in the highly unlikely chance that, having listened to all this, you now want to go away and watch either of these productions, Noah, is that going to be possible?
Why, yes, it is, Matthew. As mentioned earlier this episode, The King and the Chorus Girl coincidentally turned up on TCM just this April. I think it may no longer be available on demand from TCM starting in May, so you may be just too late to see it there. The King and the Chorus Girl is available on DVD, though. You can track it down that way. You also probably can find it somewhere on the internet, but we don't know anything about that. The television version of Time for Elizabeth is not presently commercially available, but it too is knocking around that old internet of ours, and you may be able to find it there. We might even link to it on our website. I don't know. I don't know what goes on.
So, Kathy, thank you very much indeed for coming on and talking to us about these two oft overlooked and perhaps rightly overlooked projects.
It's been a thrill.
Oh, that word.
You picked up on it. I was waiting. Maybe if I'd said, it gave me a thrill.
Noah, do we have a Patreon update?
Well, I would just like to thank all of our subscribers, including our new subscribers, many of whom have climbed aboard just recently. Some of our listeners have already noticed that we're doing things a little backwards this month. Our bonus segment has already been released prior to our proper episode. And the April postcard is going out in the mail today as we record this. So it will have been recently mailed when you hear this. The artwork for postcard number 28 is contributed by listener Nick Floyd, a new member of our stable of guest artists, who's done a pretty delightful design. I don't want to say too much about it, but it is a mock advertisement, and I predict you'll enjoy it a great deal. Thanks, subscribers, for keeping us afloat.
And also, don't forget, if you want to put a smile on my face, and why would you not, my Groucho and Duck Soup lectures are fast approaching. Thanks to Roundtable by the 92nd Street Y. I'll be talking about Groucho on the 11th and the 18th of May, and about Duck Soup on the 8th and the 15th of June. These are online events, so wherever you are, you can join me for those. It would be lovely to see you. If you go to roundtable.org and search either for me or for Groucho or for Duck Soup. Incorrigible highbrows that we are going to substitute a final poem for a final song for this edition of the podcast, and it's come to us via James Matthew Wilson, who, despite being only one person, is the Cullen Foundation Chair in English Literature and Professor of Humanities at the University of St. Thomas, the Director of the MFA Programme in Creative Writing, Poet in Residence at the Benedict XVI Institute, and the Poetry Editor of Modern Age. And he sent me an email in which he wrote, "Last Christmas I gave my 5 children 2 books on the Marx Brothers, the second of which was your guide to their films. We are all great fans of the Marx Brothers, and even the youngest, John Cassian, who is now 6 years old, has seen them all at least twice. I incorporated that theme into part of a long poem I published during and about the pandemic, and I thought you might find it amusing." So here, a poem that appears in his book, The Strangeness of the Good, which is available now from Angelico Press. This is James Matthew Wilson's April 1st, 2020 from Quarantine Notebook.
April 1st, 2020. For Hillary. The rising light of early morning falls on kitchen table, tucked-in chairs, and finds at last the open floor's dark-paneled wood. There, 15 months old now, John Cassian stands, smiling and naked save his new-changed diaper. He takes 3 gambling steps before the fridge, then lowers down in fear of his own powers. This walking is all new to him. I think that he is of you, and you're here with me, though also upstairs catching one last hour of sleep within the heavy curtain dark. That is one gift for you, that final hour, to start our 14th anniversary. My brother's called to say he's got the virus, electric cables jolting through his blood, and fever sweat anoints him with its crown. He lies in bed and thinks of the Pacific, 2 miles away, as if it were the start of boundless freedom and of paradise. When we hang up, I scan the morning paper and find each headline bellows out its number, the count of dying dead or newly ill, of unemployed who wait for promised checks, or homeless in Las Vegas left to squat in painted hopscotch squares upon a tarmac until the shelter can reopen. What of this will we discuss at morning coffee? What will we do behind our bolted doors to mark the depth to which this day transformed us? The children watched Duck Soup the other night, the 100th time or so we've put it on. What starts in pageant and diplomacy soon veers with Harpo's motorbike to chaos, descends by an incessant squeak of horns, and through a trial as fake as those in Lear, lands sprawling finally on a battlefield. And there, within a humble, bombed-out shack, Groucho's long wayward quest for Margaret Dumont reaches some kind of end, in such a place where fate not only brings 2 loves together, but guarantees that Groucho can't escape. How grateful he must be for tanks and shells to keep them both holed up. Even though his mouth may rat-tat like a wild Tommy gun, undoing pleas of love with sudden wisecracks, there is no getting out of her great arms. Am I, like him, a sharp-tongued unromantic? Or do you see behind the fake mustache and lit cigar, eyes roll with adoration? The hour doesn't lend itself to slapstick. One friend with his black sense of humor notes that if the virus doesn't get us, well, the Yellowstone volcano probably will, or more tornadoes charging up from Jonesboro, and failing that, an asteroid is due to brush by Earth the final days of April. He doesn't plan to stick around to see it. Under the circumstance, it's no surprise the news reports a case of tragic love. A husband and his wife, afraid to die, hide in their home and watch the president on television mumbling on like Chico about the promises of chloroquine. They find some on the shelf or something like it, and though it's labeled poison, don't ingest, they mix it with their Pepsi. In an hour the husband's dead, the wife in hospital. The darkness would snuff out our morning light. A friend in Colorado also writes me, explaining his long silence with a story. A month ago, his wife ran off the road and could remember nothing of it after. Her back now broken, staring at the lights above her bed, she listens as the doctors inform her husband that her neck and brain are riddled with small cancerous growths. And now, the hospital sealed off with quarantine, her husband drives her there each week, then waits. She disappears within. An hour goes by. The doctors fight her death in short, quick bursts, and then she's pushed back out and they drive home, her body drifting with the car through daylight. What does her husband feel again beside her? One more punctilious duty in a life they've shared and go on sharing as they may? The rhythm of their marriage troubled, yes, but carrying on one treatment at a time. Or is it something more? This friend of mine, who's always had a streak of Groucho in him, to meet the darkness with a snappy word, does he now feel the oceanic weight of love? The kind that lifts you up and pulls you out and drags you deep into the tide and says, from now on, think of nothing else, but that you cannot bear to lose this one you love. Feel your ambitions drop away, your defects and your failings too, and give the little that is left to try to save her. and hope for nothing but that she will live. I stand here in the kitchen, where I started, shaken by what comes calling from afar, the halting, stumbling steps of doubtful futures, and think there is no gift that's adequate to greet you at your waking on this day.
The Marx Brothers Council podcast is produced by Bob Gassell. Matthew Conium's books, including the annotated Marx Brothers, the annotated Abbott and Costello, and That's Me, Groucho, are published by McFarland. Noah Diamond's book, Give Me a Thrill, The Story of Alsatias, is published by Bear Manor Media. To leave a comment and for more info about this and all episodes, visit us at MarxBrothersCouncilPodcast.com. For the latest Marx Brothers and podcast news, look for us on Blue Sky and Twitter. And join the fun with the largest and most vibrant Marx community online, a club that will have someone like you as a member, the Marx Brothers Council Facebook group. That's it for now. Swordfish!
That's it, you get it.